Welcome to Big Ramatha's Adventure. Today, we're going to talk power. I'm going to show you how you can get twice the power for less than half the cost by doing it yourself versus buying an option from the manufacturer of your RV, travel trailer, or as they say overseas, caravan. I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about why you might want to build a solar power system on your RV or travel trailer. If you have been camping only in RV parks and campgrounds that offer electric hookups, you are missing out on a lot of great spots. Even before what's become known as boondocking started to become popular, there are a lot of campgrounds out there that can fit RVs and travel trailers of many different sizes but don't have any electric hookup. And if you're avoiding them, you can really be missing out. Now, with the rise in popularity of boondocking, there are even more possibilities and great places that you can find to camp. And having available power can be very important. For me personally, I need it so that I can sleep. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. I need a CPAP machine to sleep, and that's been my main power concern. It caused me to give up my more rugged tent camping that I preferred for most of my life and finally give in and join this hashtag RV life, as they like to call it. Now, if you have been looking to get into a new RV, travel trailer, caravan, whatever you want to call it, you may have seen some options from the manufacturer. They could be called an off-grid package, as is the case for the Intech OVR lineup, what I own here. There are 3 models in this lineup, and Intech offers the same package on all 3. Now, they're not the only manufacturer that does this. In fact, most of the manufacturers out there use the same company and use the same components for these off-grid or solar package options that they offer. And those are provided through a company called Zamp, which is a subsidiary of Dometic. Now, Dometic, you may recognize, they make a lot of different components that are used by all sorts of different RV and travel trailer manufacturers. My old trailer, also an Intech, it was a Flyer Explorer, had a Dometic fridge in it, and it had a AC/heat unit on the roof that was also made by that company. I think there are a couple things in this one that are as well. I can't remember. I know my fridge here is not. I think the AC maybe, but you get the point. It's not limited to this brand or this lineup. You'll find this option available across a wide variety of manufacturers. And the thing is, they charge a ridiculous amount of money for that option. In this lineup, it can cost you over $8,000, and all you're going to get is something that looks a little bit like this. You're going to get 400 watts worth of solar panels, a couple of 12-volt lithium batteries for a total of 200 amp hours, a 30 amp MPPT solar charge controller, and a 2,000 watt inverter. Now, it's not that it's a bad package, it's just horrifically overpriced. You can build what I've done here and what I'm going to show you for less than half the cost and get significantly higher battery capacity and more recharge capability through a larger wattage of solar panels on there and have a lot more flexibility to meet your power needs. Now, with the Zamp products, you can even buy the exact same components that these manufacturers offer for a lot less and save roughly half the cost by doing it yourself versus buying the option from the manufacturer or dealer. Those same exact components that they include in that option that cost $8,000, sometimes more, can be had for just under $4,000. You can get the exact same solar panels, you can get the exact same batteries, exact same charge controller, exact same inverter, everything, and it's going to cost you about half as much as what the manufacturer charges you. Now, there is a small downside to that, but in my opinion, it is worth the trade-off. at least when it comes to the Intech OVR line of trailers, the same is probably true for other manufacturers. Buying the option from the manufacturer gives you an additional power distribution panel. So you get an additional alternating current panel, extra circuit breakers just for the inverter. And that allows everything to run completely internal to the RV or travel trailer, versus what I've had to do, and you'll see a little bit later in the video, because I don't have that sub panel, I ended up having to essentially plug my trailer into itself. I run the normal shore power cord that you would plug in if you were at a campground that had electric hookup to the inverter. I've run a extension cord basically to the exterior of the trailer, and then I plug it into itself. So from this end of the trailer over to here, there's my 30 amp cord running and plugging into the inverter. Now, one of the other benefits I have of the system that I've built here is that I can run absolutely everything off of it. That 3500 watt inverter is enough to not only run all the other 110, 120 volt appliances in here, such as there's a TV back there, there's another TV in there, I've got a microwave in here, and then the heat and air conditioning. Those are all the things that run off of alternating current. The rest of the components in my trailer, my refrigerator, all of my lights, the water heater, the max air fans, I think I'm probably missing a couple other things. Those are all running off of 12 volts, so they don't use the inverter. The 2000 watt inverter option that the manufacturer includes cannot run all of those things. It will run most of it, but you will not be able to run the AC or the heat. Now, you're really not going to want to try and run the AC for very long. It is extremely power hungry and will deplete your batteries in a hurry. But I can if I need to, and if I'm going to be camping somewhere where I anticipate it being very hot and needing to run the AC a little bit here and there, I can do it for a little while completely off the batteries. If it ends up being more than what the batteries can handle or what I can recharge off the solar, I do have a dual fuel 4500 watt generator that can run off of either gasoline or propane that I can recharge the battery from, or run the AC off a little bit if I need to. So you've got a lot of different flexibility and options. Let's talk about some of the different options that are available when building your own solar power system. Now, a lot of people might be a little intimidated by doing this. Working with electricity can be kind of scary. The options out there might be a little overwhelming. Relax. It's not as difficult as it seems. I think if I can do it, pretty much almost anybody can do it. I'm going to show you exactly how I built my system. But first, let's talk about those options. You're going to come across different voltages out there. So most common is still 12 volt. It's the same thing that your car, your tow vehicle runs off of, and it's used kind of all over the place. You might also see 24 volt systems. They're a little less common. And then finally, what I've decided to go with was a 48 volt system. Now, 48 volt systems are becoming more and more normal in the industry. You're going to see a lot more of that, I think. And the reason being is you can get greater capacity for a bit cheaper. It is a little less expensive in some areas not so much compared to 12 volt. It's really not any more complex, and it can be a little bit safer. With a 12 volt system, you're going to have multiple different components compared to the 48 volt. So for 12 volt, you'll start with, of course, a 12 volt battery. Highly recommend doing the lithium or lithium iron phosphate, also known as LiFePO4. You're going to want probably at least a 100 amp hour battery, if not more. And then from the battery, you're also going to want something like a smart shunt to monitor the output of the battery, how much capacity is left. Now, a lot of batteries are available as smart batteries, and they may have a built-in monitoring system as part of their battery management system already. So the smart shunt could be optional, but it's a great starting point, because if you're not sure how much power you're using, you can measure it starting with the smart shunt first before you start upgrading your batteries or installing any other components in the system. The other thing that you're going to need is a solar charge controller. Now, these are available in a PWM, or pulse width module, or MPPT, and I forget what that acronym stands for, but the one that you want to go for is the MPPT. They are a little bit more expensive than the pulse width module, but they are far more efficient and give you much better performance when it comes to recharging your batteries. Then you're going to need a inverter. And if you want to be able to charge off of something other than just the solar power, so if you want to be able to plug in and charge the battery in situations where you're not getting enough daylight to fully recharge, then you're going to need a charger as well. And if you want to charge from your tow vehicle, in the case of a travel trailer like mine, it may already be wired to do that. You might not need anything extra. You also could end up needing a DC to DC charger that will hook into the 7-pin for your trailer connection, and then that can charge your battery as well. Now, I'm not going to talk about 24 volt really anymore at all, because it's a bit less common, and frankly wasn't interested in it at all. For the 48 volt system, a little less components required, because you can get a combination inverter, charger, and solar charge controller in one, which is what I have. Now, I went with the Renogy 3500 watt combination inverter, charger, and solar controller, simply because of availability and cost. It cost about $700 with a little M1 controller, or it's not really a controller, more of a display, that honestly, if I had known about it before, I probably would have not got the bundle with that. I haven't found it to be very useful. It does consume a little bit of power, not very much. It wants to have an internet connection to work, which most of the time I don't have. And really, I can just use the app on my phone to connect and view the status of the solar panels and how much charge or how much load I'm using and things like that. So I don't really need this extra little screen to do all that. They do have an updated version that I believe is called the Renogy One Core. If that had been available when I purchased it, I think that I would have gone for that and found it to be much more useful. It's a little bit more compact of unit, but it also includes a leveling system to help you level your trailer or RV when you park it. I already own one though. I have one from Beach Lane, and I just installed it recently. I haven't really got to use it, so I have no interest in upgrading to that. You can save yourself about $100 if you don't get the bundle and just get the inverter charger by itself. Now, there are other options available out there. There are some things from like Growatt is one. Victron is a little bit more on the expensive side, has some. Initially, the Victron unit is what I wanted, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I think it was pretty new at the time, and I didn't want to wait. I was a little impatient, so I went with the Renogy. The only downside with the Renogy unit is it consumes a little bit more power at idle compared to some of the other options that are available out there on the market, but they all function pretty much the same. You're going to want to get that at least 3,500 watts if you want to run something like your AC and heat. There are some that have a little bit higher wattage output than that, and you're going to want to have that charger and solar controller and inverter all in one. Saves you on having to buy the separate components, and that's where a lot of the cost saving is compared to the 12 volt system. So those individual components, the charger and the inverter by itself, can add up to cost a few $100s more than the combined systems that are available for 48 volt. If you made it this far, don't go anywhere yet. Still got more to cover. I just wanted to pause and say thanks for watching and remind you to please like and subscribe. Now let's get back to it. Another good place to start is with the solar panels themselves. You'll want to take measurements of the roof of your RV or travel trailer to figure out how many panels you can fit up there. Once you've determined how much space is available, you want to look at the dimensions for any solar panels that are of interest to you. Now for my trailer, it's about 29 feet long, and the back half had just enough space to fit 1200 watts worth of 100 watt solar panels. The panels that I chose are from Renogy. They're 100 watt black series, and they cost about $135 each. The reason that I chose these is because they're flexible, lightweight panels, and I didn't need to drill into anything in order to mount them. I used some VHB tape, and then for the wiring, I used, I think it was like this black outdoor heavy-duty Gorilla tape, and it's worked out very well. I've had everything mounted up there for over a year. I've driven thousands of miles at interstate speeds of 70 miles an hour. It's gone through some major storms, and nothing has moved. It's all very solidly mounted into place. Now that was important for me. One, I didn't want to have to drill any holes. Two, I wanted to keep the weight down so that I could keep the maximum cargo capacity, because my trailer does happen to be a toy hauler, and I do haul some ATVs and things inside of here. So I didn't want to reduce my overall capacity in the trailer by adding a lot of extra weight onto the roof. I also didn't want to damage the roof at all or do anything that was really a permanent modification or required drilling into it. Once you've determined how many solar panels you're going to use and what the total wattage is going to be, you can use that to determine what size of MPPT charge controller you're going to need. Now, the more watts you have, the larger capacity charge controller you're going to need. And you want to pay attention to not just the watts, but the volts and amps as well. And those will determine how you connect things, whether you connect them in series or in parallel, because you don't want to exceed either the maximum voltage or wattage for your charge controller. Now, when you're looking at the details for those charge controllers, they will tell you what the maximum voltage, amperage, and wattage is. So make sure that the number and totals for the panels that you've selected will not exceed capacity of the charge controller. The charge controller that I have, that's part of the combination inverter and charger, is able to handle a total of 50 amps. I have chosen to wire mine in, there's a total of 12 panels, and I've chosen to wire them in 2 series of 6 connected in parallel. Another important thing to keep in mind here is that the way you wire them up, you need the voltage to be higher than that of your battery. So in case of a 48 volt battery, the actual operational voltage of it is a little bit higher than that. It's considered fully charged when you're actually up closer to like 54 volts. You can go all the way up as high as like 58 volts during charging. And then when you're not charging, you'll see it run around 51.2 volts is kind of the optimum range there. So the voltage coming from your solar panels is going to need to be higher than that. Obviously, you need a lot less voltage when you're dealing with 12 volt. However, the amps are going to be higher in that situation. So you want to make sure that you're higher than 12 volts if you're using that, higher than 48 volts if you're gone that route, and that you're not exceeding the amps for the charge controller. With my setup, I believe the 2 series of 6 connected in parallel is somewhere around 116 volts, if I remember correctly. Might be off on that. And then it's right around 10 or so amps. And that is what I use to charge the battery. The final decision we need to make is what type of battery capacity we're going to install. There's a few things to consider here, one of them being the available space for the battery. Now, if you're going the 12 volt route, you're going to need more space. It's going to weigh more. It's going to take up more volume in whatever compartment you have there, because to increase capacity, you're going to have to add additional batteries. Just like with the manufacturer options that we talked about earlier, they start with two 12 volt 100 amp hour batteries. You can get those all the way up to 300 and 400 amp hour, but they're going to be a lot larger and heavier battery. For the 48 volt battery that I have room for more if I wanted, but again, keep in mind that if you have more battery capacity than you could ever hope to recharge in a day with your solar, you're going to end up having to supplement. And there's nothing really wrong with that, but it could be overkill, and again, you might not use a lot of that battery capacity. So measure the spot that you're going to put the battery in. Take a look on the listing for wherever you're going to buy the battery from and check the dimensions of it and make sure it's going to fit. If you do end up running more than one battery, you've got a couple of different options there. If you're going to stick with 12 volt, you want to run things in parallel so that you're not increasing the voltage. If you want to go up to 48 volt, you can either do a single 48 volt battery like I've done, or you can run multiple 12 volt batteries in series. So if you take 4 12 volt batteries, run them in series, that will change it to 48 volt. I wouldn't recommend that simply because it's going to take up a lot more space than just going with a single 48 volt battery. The last component you need to consider if you're going the 48 volt route is how are you going to run all of the 12 volt systems in your RV or travel trailer. And to do that, you can use a simple step-down converter. These can be had from around $20 or $30 all the way up to about $200. Now, the more expensive options are going to have things like Bluetooth remote monitoring and an app. I really didn't find that necessary because I have that functionality through some of the other components in the system. So the cheaper $20, $30 one like this works out very well for me. Enough talk about components. Let's take a look at how everything gets connected. I'll also cover a few of the mistakes I made and show you how I corrected those. I want to make sure the trailer is unplugged, that our battery disconnect is in the off position, and that the circuit breaker for our converter here is also in the off position before we begin. Let's take a look at what not to do and talk about a couple of mistakes I made when I initially put all this together. Originally, this had a 12 volt, I think it was either a lead acid or AGM battery in a container on this side of the battery compartment here. You can see a little hole down in the bottom there, and then up here there was a hole where a tube goes to the outside of the trailer to vent the gas that those types of batteries can put off. It's not necessary with the LifePo battery, so I removed all that. But as you can see, it's a bit of a mess in here. I threw it together in kind of a hurry, and things are a little unorganized. We're going to take care of that as part of this video here. Now, one of the mistakes I made was in connecting the wiring harness for this step-down converter. Because I'm using a 48 volt battery, I need to be able to step down to 12 volts to run the 12 volt system in the trailer. Now, it didn't come with any instructions at all, and it just has some markings on here that show you where to connect which wire. It can be a little bit confusing when working with wiring in an RV or travel trailer like this, because they don't use the standard red and black wires for DC connections. Here you can see there's red wires, those are the original 12 volt wires, and white wires. Now, the white wires are the negative and the red is still the positive. I didn't pay close enough attention when connecting these, and you can see there's the yellow wire from the wiring harness is connected to the white wires in the trailer, which is wrong. They should be connected to the red ones. As a consequence, the 12 volt system didn't work. And as a workaround, what I ended up doing was plugging the trailer into itself, so it plugs into the inverter charger here, and running things in a very inefficient manner. So we were going from 48 volt DC into the converter, going to 120 volt AC into the trailer, and then into the converter that's built into the trailer from 120 volt AC down to 12 volt DC there. Very inefficient way to run. So we're going to fix that mistake here, clean things up. I'm going to install some bus bars here, clean up all the wiring, and see if we can't get this working better and more efficiently. Went ahead and removed the battery to avoid accidentally touching the leads on it and causing anything to spark or short. So now you can see what this looks like without anything in it. I also took the inverter charger out and set it up here so we can get a look at how all the connections work on here. On the right side, these wires going in here are for the solar. So I've disconnected the solar on the roof to make sure that there's no power getting to the inverter charger here at all. Next, here in the middle is where the battery connection is. So I've got a pair of 2-gauge wires running from there. For the negative wire, we have it going to this smart shunt. And then the positive wire is going here to this 100 amp fuse. And then on the left side here, we have the AC connections. So there's an output is the first one, and then on the far left is the input. And for this, I took a heavy duty extension cord, cut it in half, and then I ran the output out to the outside of the trailer through this hole over here. And then the input, I shoved down through that hole there if I ever need to use it, but I really don't use the input to charge this very often. Most of the time we're charging off of solar. I've also started cleaning up some of the wiring here. So this bundle of white wires here, again, that's the negative. And then over here, these red wires with the fuse on them are the positive, and these are what's running into the rest of the trailer for the 12 volt system. So next thing I'm going to do here is figure out where to put these bus bars. I've got 2 sets of them. I'm going to use one set for 48 volt and another set for 12 volt. I'm going to get those mounted, get wires connected, and then we'll get the battery put back in here and connect the battery to the 48 volt bus bars. Our install is complete, so let's take a look at all the components and how they're connected and talk just a little bit about each of them. First, we have the battery here. This is the 48 volt 100 amp hour or 5,120 watt hour battery. It is just some generic Chinese brand that I found off of Amazon. Only reason that I chose it was inexpensive. It had a 3-year warranty, it had good reviews, and it was readily available. It had Prime 2-day shipping. And as I mentioned before, I was kind of in a hurry wanting to get this set up before a camping trip last season. Coming off the battery, you can see the negative wire goes into a Victron smart shunt here. And then the positive wire goes to a 100 amp A&L fuse. Now the smart shunt is optional. I like it. It was about $115. The battery was right around $1,000. The smart shunt is a great starting point if you're looking to build a system or upgrade an existing system. You can hook it into your stock battery, either your lead acid, AGM, or lithium. It handles all battery types, and measure how much power you're consuming on a regular basis, and that can give you an idea of the battery capacity that you might want to expand to, upgrade to. Now, from the smart shunt and the fuse, there are 2 bus bars down at the bottom there that are oriented horizontally. Those are the 48 volt bus bars. From there, they'll have a couple wires connecting into our Renogy 3500 watt inverter, charger, and MPPT controller. There's a couple wires running across the top here. These are the wires that go up to the solar panels on the roof. There are 2 ZAMP ports on the roof that I plugged into. So those 1200 watts worth of panels come down into the trailer, and these wires were fortunately pre-installed, so I didn't have to run any additional wiring inside the trailer. But those 8-gauge wires connect into the combination inverter, charger, solar controller here and provide our solar charging capabilities. This little other box over here is our step-down converter. Now, because about 90% of the systems in my travel trailer here run on 12 volts, and we're using a 48 volt battery and charger here, we need to step down from 48 to 12 volt, and that's what this does here. This was no name brand. I think it's called like Pro Chaser or something like that. Again, a little Chinese thing that I found on Amazon. It was 30 bucks, but it works really, really well. There's a set of wires that connect to the 2 bus bars for the 48 volt system down in the bottom there that go to the input on the step down converter, and then the output connects to these other 2 bus bars on the right here where the 12 volt systems for the trailer also connect. So that allows us to run all the 12 volt systems off of this, and it happens very, very efficiently. And the last 2 cords that we have in here are for our AC or alternating current power. There is an input and an output. So the input runs down through that hole in the bottom, and that goes outside. We'll show you what that looks like outside in a moment. That allows us to recharge the batteries from AC power, either from a generator or from shore power at a campground, or I plug it into my garage here at home if I'm not getting enough sunlight to recharge things through the solar panels. The output here runs through this compartment next to it. Now, the stock battery here was a AGM battery which required ventilation, so there was a ventilation tube that I removed because it's not necessary with the lithium battery. And then this wire runs outside the trailer, allows me to plug the trailer into itself to provide power to the 120 volt system. And then one last thing that we have in here is the Bluetooth module for the inverter, charger, solar controller. So that allows me to connect an app and see what the status of the controller is. And that's it for everything in here. If you'd like to see a more in-depth review on any one of these components, be sure to leave a comment and tell me what you'd like to see a more of a review on, and I'll be happy to do another video on it. Let's take a quick look outside. Here you can see the output from the inverter running through the ventilation hole for the old AGM or lead acid batteries. Now, both those types of batteries require ventilation. Lithium batteries do not, so I've repurposed it in order to run power and make it accessible out here. We can follow the cord down into the 30 amp plug for the trailer. So the trailer is essentially plugged into itself in order to access the alternating current power through the inverter. Now, when the trailer is in motion, I tuck that cord back up inside, and then we have the vent cover down here. And I just screw that vent cover back into place, and then we're ready to go. And when we reach our destination, unscrew it, pull the cord out through the hole, and plug itself into itself. I also have another cord run out here, and this is an input for the inverter. So if I need to connect the shore power to charge the batteries for any reason, say I'm somewhere that the sun isn't shining enough to use the solar, I can connect to either a generator, or if I'm at a campground that provides power, I can charge the battery that way and then still keep everything running off of the inverter here if desired. Another thing you'll see on the outside here is this ZAMP port. These are pretty common on a lot of trailers. I don't use the one on the side here. There is actually 2 identical ports up on the roof, and I have all of my solar panels plugged in there. But if you only had one on the side like this, you could run a ground array, or you could run some wiring down into it to connect to it. One thing to keep in mind for the ZAMP ports is the polarity is reversed on them. For some reason, ZAMP does everything backwards from everybody else. So you got two options if you have one of these ports and want to make use of it. One option being using a polarity reverser. So it's just an SAE connector that reverses the polarity before it goes in there. That's what I've opted to do. I've got one up on the roof connected to the port there. Or alternatively, you can just reverse the wiring before you connect it to your solar charge controller inside of your trailer or RV. Thanks again for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you think the trade-offs I made were worth it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.